This is the panel on harnessing the power of young communities of color, the success story of San Jose's minimum wage increase. I'm Dorian Warren. I teach politics at Columbia University, and I'm a board member, a very proud board member of Working Partnerships USA, which convened this panel along with the South Bay Labor Council. We're going to start, to wake you up, we're going to start with a 2-minute video produced by Silicon Valley Debug, which worked on the social media aspects of the minimum wage campaign. And this video will be a great introduction to get us to the heart of the issue.
So this is where, yep.
My name's Alex Matua. I'm 21 years old from San Jose, California. My son's name is DeAndre Matua. 8 months.
Tell them what to do.
I've lived in San Jose my whole life. You know, I'm a single father right now. Just watching after my son, basically making sure he's taken care of. It's hard to do on minimum wage. I've been working minimum wage jobs my whole life. First job when I was 17, you know, retail. Retail's all I've ever done, you know what I mean? Just all minimum wage jobs. Just trying to make ends meet. I went to school for music at Mission College in Santa Clara. I plan to return when my son turns 1, but I mean, honestly, that's not looking possible. You know, transportation to and from school, you know, I mean, cost for books and units and shit. The raise from whatever it is right now to that $10, that would make a huge difference. Basically, like raising my son, you know, I wouldn't have to worry so much about, you know, having a budget. Like, I'm gonna have this for his diapers and his food and his clothes and everything, you know what I mean? I could finally, you know, buy some good interview clothes, you know what I mean? I'm not really having the ball clothes. Right now, I'm rocking somebody else's shirt. You know what I mean? I had to borrow money to get these pants. As a, you know, it sucks having to borrow money and stuff like that. And, I can help out more with rent, you know, maybe get my own place, because this whole being over 18 and living at home, it's not the business, you know what I mean? And it's way more common nowadays, you know, for my age group, and that's sad, you know, it shouldn't be like that. If the average minimum wage check is a lot less than the average cost of living. I don't see why anybody would vote against the increase of minimum wage. Like, you know, people need help. I mean, the biggest thing that I can think of with that minimum wage increase would be a little bit more peace of mind, and that's priceless in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, less stressing. You can't put a price tag on that.
So thanks to Silicon Valley Debug, which is a media, community organizing, and entrepreneurial collective based here in San Jose. And Debug is represented by Jean Melisane, who produced the video. And Jean, I think, is here. Please stand up. And Silicon Valley Debug has a booth here at Netroots Nation, and we invite you to stop by and chat with them about their work. So on March 11th of this year, more than 40,000 workers in San Jose got a 25% raise to $10 an hour. They are maids and domestic workers, they're waiters, retail clerks, they're the city's lowest paid employees, and they've been trying to support themselves and their families by working full-time jobs, paying wages that didn't even cover their average apartment rent in Silicon Valley, much less the basics of everyday life, groceries, bus tickets, diapers. And how those 40,000 people got this raise is the subject of our conversation today. So the idea, and this is close to my heart, the idea began with students in a San Jose State University sociology class, many of them working minimum wage jobs themselves. They quickly reached out to the labor movement for help, and they needed a movement of supporters like themselves who understood the issue and were willing to put themselves and their resources on the line. Of course, with all minimum wage campaigns, all campaigns for economic justice, there was enormous opposition. A city council that could have raised the wage refused. And a chamber of commerce that could afford to spend nearly $1 million to oppose the efforts. Yet when the votes were counted on election night, San Jose's Raise the Wage Coalition won 60% of the votes. Now, one of the things the campaign proved is about who matters in politics, and this is really what we want to talk about today. In this campaign, it was young people, Latinos, Asian Pacific Islanders, nonprofits that had never before gotten involved in a large-scale civic campaign, and in partnership with labor, which in this region, which in San Jose and the Bay, is reinventing itself. Now, the panelists we're talking to today played key roles in this huge victory. And after we've discussed their experience for a few minutes, I'm going to open the floor to questions from you. So first, I want to start with Cindy Chavez, who is the Executive Director of Working Partnerships USA, a local policy and activist organization that works for and with low-income communities of color in San Jose. These are not the people on the television news when you see the latest story from Silicon Valley on Apple or Google. Cindy herself has been a vice mayor of San Jose and served 2 terms in the city council before returning to her work here at Working Partnerships. Cindy, first question is for you. Why is it so important to get young people of color involved in politics through the minimum wage campaign?
Well, you know, I think for a lot of us activists, and I'm sorry, get that a little closer. Great. So I think for a lot of us who've been doing community activism for a long time, we understand that our job is to replace ourselves with the next generation of leaders who will drive us into the future. And one of the challenges is, and I say this as somebody who's almost 50, is that I remember, I remember being the youngest person in the room. I remember being that young, enthusiastic person, and I was wondering, who's going to take my place, right? Now, Working Partnerships saw an opportunity to not just train people, because that's what we do. We train people in leadership development, we do research on the economy and on healthcare and other important issues. But this was an opportunity to not just train people, but to let them live the experience. And probably the most important thing I would say is that what happened here was a spark got lit by young people who woke up older people, right? And through that, no experience but being in a campaign helps you learn how to change the world than to change it yourself. And even more sublime was winning. And I'll just tell this one quick story, and I'll move on to the next panelist. You know, on election night, it was my favorite election night of every election night I've ever had, and I have had many of them, including my own, right? But it was the youngest election night I ever saw. We had a room packed with young people of color, like the NIC Councilmember Ashikawa, who was a leader in this movement, and I've never seen anything like that, and every election should be that good.
Thank you, Cindy. Speaking of young folks, I want to next introduce Elisha St. Laurent, who is one of the sociology students at San Jose State that I mentioned earlier. She is president of the Campus Alliance for Economic Justice, and what's the acronym, Elisha? Cafe J. She's a young mother with aspirations to open a teen mother support group to provide tools for empowering young mothers to continue their higher education. So Elisha, tell us more about why was it important for students to get involved with Working Partnerships and the South Bay Labor Council, to get them involved in the campaign along with the student effort.
Well, I'd first like to say that we realized in a classroom setting you have to always apply the knowledge, but we were never challenged to do that. So in our classroom, we made sure that it wasn't just a personal problem, but it was a huge problem for the community, and that's so important when you are working with the community to get them engaged. And not only that, it was we couldn't go to labor or to Working Partnership to say that, you know, this is an issue affecting just a small population. It was affecting everybody in our community, whether you were white, Mexican, or African American, any nationality, or low income, or middle class. It was affecting them, and I think that was the most important issue that we found. And through that, we knew that Working Partnership had experience, and they were able to pull individuals in the community, and they worked together already, and they were engaged, and we wanted to be engaged. So we connected, we became allies together, and we supported each other all the way. And I think that was the most important issue, and how we were able to successfully come together and win.
All right. So I want to bring Nikki Gonzalez-Yoon in, who served on the Raise the Wage Steering Committee along with Cindy. Nikki's now working on taking the minimum wage campaigns to Berkeley and Oakland. So for those of you that are in those places, make sure you talk to Nikki before you leave the room. Nikki works as a college teacher at De Anza College, and at heart he's an activist and an organizer in addition to a professor. He was a congressional fellow in 2001 in the office of my favorite senator of all time, Paul Wellstone from Minnesota. And because he's a slacker, he has both a PhD and law degree from UC Berkeley. So Nikki, how did student interest in the minimum wage issue compare to other issues on which you've worked with students during your career?
Thank you. This was an amazing campaign, and before I go there, I want to really hats off to the San Jose State students and the Labor Council, without whom none of this would really happen. Amazingly, none of it would have happened. On this issue, minimum wage issue, one of the real differences was that it was really tangible for the students. I remember at the point where we had qualified the measure for the ballot, we had this meeting in front of the city council, and we were trying to do turnout. I remember Cindy was saying, let's try to get 500 people to the city council meeting. And this is, kind of early in the campaign still, before you had a lot of money behind it, and we didn't know we didn't think the city council would probably go for it. They could have done some bad things when they moved it forward to the ballot. And we turned out 50 students from De Anza College, and one of the students who came down there, Angus Teeters, in the back of the room there, he stood up, and during the testimony in front of the city council, he said, we know this is the United States. This is how things go. We know that in America you need a good education to get a good job, but we shouldn't need to have a good job to get a good education. This minimum wage that we've got right now just doesn't work for us, and we're not able to make it ahead. It was really tangible. I remember after we won, which was an amazing night. It was my favorite election night. We don't get wins like this all the time, so it was pretty exciting. I remember the next term, the winter term, first day of class, I'm telling the story to my students, 100 students in the room. They don't get to hear about victories that much, and so I'm telling the story of the win. And I asked the students, well, how many of you are minimum wage workers? And a bunch of hands go up, and one student, he stands up and he says, yeah, in my shop, we're talking about this every day. We're counting down the days till we get a raise. That's the difference for these students. It's very, very tangible.
Thank you. Last but not least, on our panel is Ben Field, who is the Executive Officer of the South Bay Labor Council. Like Nikki, Ben is a slacker. He has a PhD in law degrees from Cal as well, and experience on Capitol Hill, where he worked as a legislative aide to former Congressman Don Edwards from San Jose. So Ben, the question for you, as head of a labor council representing 100,000 union workers, why did your unions care about a minimum wage campaign when your members already have living wage jobs?
Right, it's a great question. The mission of the labor movement overall is to benefit all working families. And the dirty little secret of Silicon Valley is that working families here are not doing well. That the job growth has really been in very low wage jobs and a little bit in higher wage jobs, sort of like a Victorian gown model for job growth. And things are just getting tougher and tougher for working families. And so the labor movement has an interest in raising the standards for all working families. Now, as Dorian mentioned, the vast majority of unionized workers are making more than the minimum wage, but there is a strategy, an organizational strategy of raising standards for all so that the delta between those ununionized jobs and unionized jobs is smaller, making it perhaps easier for unions to organize workers and gain even further benefits. But really, the more important reason for getting behind the minimum wage increase had to do with the basic fact that the labor movement needs to add value to the community as a whole, not just its members. And if we are not doing that, then the labor movement will die. So we need to get out in front. We need to be at the vanguard of the argument for good quality jobs, and that's what we did. We took the moral lead with our many community partners and stood for something that had deep resonance with the people in this community. That is the idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, that you ought to earn a fair wage. And so that's the basic reason that we got behind the minimum wage increase. Now, there were other reasons as well. There were less important reasons, which had to do with capacity building for our own organization. And I want to talk just very briefly about that. We, in the course of this campaign, managed to make and deepen connections with various community organizations and student groups that we really benefited from, the labor movement benefited from, and I think the progressive community benefits from those connections as well. And we excited our own base. Our own base, as a couple of the panelists have mentioned, were really, really energized by this campaign. It was a great election night for us for that reason. The energy in the room was just terrific. And we learned a lot from this campaign, which we may not be able to get into great detail on here, but I encourage you to go to Dennis Raj's panel on Saturday morning. He's my political director, the brilliant Dennis Raj. We'll be talking about the details of how you do a very complicated campaign on a local scale on a very, very small budget Saturday morning.
Thank you, Ben. If only other labor councils around the country could be as progressive and forward-looking as you. Cindy, I want to come back to you for a moment. And Elisha talked about why students turn to you, but there's another aspect to that question. You and Working Partnerships responded to the students. So can you talk about your observations on the evolution of the young people in the campaign as they became very mature political activists?
So one of the things that Working Partnerships did was create a program called Justice Summer. And that program took young people who wanted to dedicate their summer really to this campaign and to learning the art of organizing. And I think that's a really important tradition and work that needs to be, carried on. What came out of that, to my, I never stopped being just awe-inspired by these young people. Because as a young person, and I remember this myself, you want to get in, you want to change the world, and what we were trying to do was marry just the broad, deep enthusiasm of young people with what we've learned about how to be disciplined in terms of change making. What is it that we know? And I think one of the points that Ben raised was that the importance of the labor movement and the fact that because of the work in our partnership, we were able to do a poll. What's challenging about that is that a poll will tell you a lot of information, and then to be able to get this group of really enthusiastic people to not talk about it just as their own experience, but as a core community value, I thought would be impossible. So every time a newspaper called and wanted to talk to someone, I'd be like, oh my God, okay. My tension would rise because, the fact is that we had a very important story to tell, and we wanted to tell it in a way that we thought voters would understand. And I think, Elisha's a great example, and there were others, Diana Crumity and all these other young people that we saw come in as with enthusiasm and leave with enthusiasm married with sophistication. And there were a number of stories like that. And I'll just tell one really quick one. We were really trying hard to make sure that we kept the press on the campaign because we didn't have any money. And when you have no money, the only thing you can do is jump in front of people and say, hey, listen to our story. So the young folks came up with all these different ideas, but one of them was to go to the Chamber of Commerce. And they met with board members and they wanted to try to persuade them to be with us, which again goes in the category of total joyful service and me jaded. Oh, not even that. But they did. And one of the things that happened is they went to the door and they took them with faith leaders and student leaders went and dropped off a clock at the Chamber of Commerce, said it's time for 10, right? And they got locked out, and the Chamber of Commerce, great press, and we were locked out. And I didn't even know this had happened until afterwards, because I got the clock in the mail from the Chamber of Commerce. Hope and enthusiasm, very good, by the way, made a brilliant press day. They did great.
That's a great story. So Alicia, to you, what are some of the changes you noticed in yourself throughout this campaign? What did you learn?
I'm not a speaker. The first day that they told me to speak, I was like, me? Speak? I had no idea, and now I have the confidence and I have leadership skills that I've never had before. I believe in myself, and I believe that it takes one person to inspire another, and I've actually learned that a lot through our campaign, because a lot of times people don't believe in the same thing as you. I actually, speaking at that event, we went to San Jose Chambers, and I asked Matt Mahood if he would walk a mile in my shoes. I'm a single mother working minimum wage, and I'm a full-time student. He's a CEO. He has money, and I don't, and he couldn't answer that question, and nor did he acknowledge me. And it just shows that this issue wasn't just affecting just me, it was affecting everybody in my neighborhood, people who were saying, like, I can't make ends meet. And it's not because I messed up, it's because it's hard to live in Silicon Valley, and it's an important issue affecting everybody in our community. And that resonated with the residents, it resonated everywhere, and we can see it across our nation now. A lot of people are asking for an increase in their wage because it's something that is important, and it's not just important to one person, it's to our communities. And I learned a lot, especially about politics. A lot of people ask me, oh, are you going to go into politics? Well, no, I don't lie. But the most important thing is that you get to know people on a different level, and people are supporting you because they know it's an important issue and it's about their community. And we've seen that through our allies, through a lot of city council members who stood behind us, and that was the most important thing, because this was a student idea that came about, but it ended up being something that affected everybody.
Precisely why we need more truth tellers in politics.
Exactly.
Nikki, let me come to you again and ask you, of all the issues in the region and in the community, why pick this fight?
It's a really good question. This issue came to me actually through a former student, Lila McCabe, who with Alicia was really instrumental in moving the issue forward. And when she first came to me and said, we want to raise the minimum wage in the city of San Jose, we're this little student group and we're going to do this, and I said, well, why don't you find something you can actually do? I don't think you can do this. This little group of 5 students, not going to happen. And she said, well, you watch. And eventually, she got me kind of excited about it. And I went to my labor union at Foothill Nyanza, and I, in the early stages of the campaign, was asking them to support this. And for them, it was not an automatic sell. In the labor movement, sometimes we don't think broadly. Now, the South Bay labor movement's amazing in this sort of broad sense, and eventually, what we were able to come to was the perspective that as working people, as faculty members, every time we would go to contract negotiation, we'd be negotiating some giveaway. What wage cut, what benefit that we were going to lose, what additional medical. And we came to the conclusion that if we didn't go on the offensive, that we would just be negotiating backwards until we fell into the grave. We'd be negotiating over how much dirt they put on top of us until we were dead. And I think Ben said it really well, that we need a different strategy in the labor movement. And what we were able to come to at Foothill Nyanza with Faculty Union was that students, the interests of students and these young working people, in fact, were our interests. They were essentially tied to our interests as faculty members, and that if we did not get out in front and support them, how would we ever expect them to support us? It really needed to be a bigger, broader picture. So, I mean, that was part of it, and the other part of it that had to do with capacity building. Marshall Gans, a lot of people know his work. He talks about the necessity of building strategic capacity. And when you think about student organizing, wow, what amazing strategic capacity there. I'll give you a couple figures to put this in perspective, right? In California alone, you have 50,000 community college teachers. You have 2.5 million community college students. We take the top 100% of students. It's an amazing group of students. All organized on 112 campuses, in classrooms, in clubs. When you go to try to organize, and my guess is all of us in this room tried to organize at some capacity, you're looking for some place where people naturally hang together. Student organizing has that amazing capacity. And so in my union, we hired 8 student interns. We did over 200 presentations on my campus alone, this big campus. We signed up 2,800 students who pledged to vote our way. And then on top of that, another 600 of them said they would post on Facebook, that they would accept, what do you call those? Texts. Sorry. I'm the oldest one on this panel. At the young age
PhD, JD.
No, so my point is that it was just this amazing capacity, and so why would we get interested in this? Well, it's movement building at its absolute best.
Well said. The best fights are often always leave a stronger movement after the victory. Ben, one more question for you, and then I have a question for the panel, and then we'll open it up. Can you talk about the impact of the minimum wage victory on the social environment, the political environment, the economic environment, you personally, on people's lives? What does it mean, really?
Yeah, well, to build on what Nikki just mentioned, really this was a movement building effort in part, and a very successful one. And I just want to mention one aspect of that, which I think is often overlooked, and that is that as union density has declined over the years, fewer and fewer young people grow up in union households, obviously. They don't have an experience of the labor movement. And so to have a campaign that brings in young people like Alicia and Lila and others, gives them an opportunity to see the labor movement in a way that they really wouldn't have seen it otherwise. And that is an intangible benefit to the labor movement, which really, it just is not measurable, but is very, very powerful and important to the labor movement. We need to build support among a younger generation. And it was funny to see as this campaign progressed, we have these old crusty labor types, and then we've got the Silicon Valley debug hip hop guys, coming in and DJing our parties. And so there was like a cultural exchange in the course of this campaign, which was very positive as a union, as a movement building strategy. And I also just want to say that we progressives had really felt like we were playing defense for many, many years. Unemployment among the trades over 30%. We were taking it in the shorts all the time in our negotiations for public employee unions. We were really feeling like we needed to go on offense, and this was a campaign that emboldened our community and made people feel like we could turn things around, we could run a campaign that would be successful, inclusive, movement building, and now we've got people thinking about what's next. We've got people thinking about whether it's going to be a domestic workers' bill of rights, or universal paid sick leave, or some sort of affordable housing measure, or something else. But we've got people thinking affirmatively about our agenda in a way that was different than we were thinking just a few years ago. So great, very positive impact.
Great. So each of you have told great stories about this campaign, and it's been quite a kumbaya moment. So I want to ask you, what was the hardest moment of the campaign? Not all at once.
I mean, I can speak to that we had the other NRA opposing us, right? The Restaurant Association. And, knowing how much money they were gonna put forward, I just remember at one point, and actually this was Derek Lemers was sitting in the front. Part of the reason we did this was it was really Derek who said, you know, we can't not do this. We working partnerships, we the labor movement, we can't walk away from this. But I just remember making that decision, right, that we were gonna go, no go, recognizing that we would at least have $500,000 spent against the campaign. And actually, as the campaign went forward, they announced that they would be spending $1.2 million, which is amazing if you think about it, to keep poor people poor, right? That's what we're gonna do. But anyway, that moment, making that decision was a very challenging one, because it was saying to the labor movement, we're gonna take your commonwealth, your treasury, on behalf of other people, and we might win. You know, that was challenging.
You know, I guess that was the thought that I had, it was the money. And I'm a grassroots organizer. I don't raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know how to do that. I wish I did, but I don't know how to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can raise $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Maybe I can do that in a good year, right? And I remember sitting there in the steering committee meetings and Cindy committing all this money and saying, well, you know, they may fire me over this. No, like really, she literally, they may fire me over this, but we have to raise this money, and just stretching out. I think the other hard thing is just like all campaigns, it's burnout work. You're just working day in and day out and pushing people and pushing yourself harder than you possibly ever imagined you could work, and then doing more. And then on election night, being really happy, amazingly happy. You get these wins, but yeah, it's just, it's exhausting. You just don't think you got it, and then you do. And you ask people, you ask every person you know to give more than they knew they had. Yeah.
Well, we as students have a very hard time committing just going to class. So, getting students involved in actually something that is really important to the community was really hard. And although they knew the effects, they had work, they had children, and they had their student orgs that they were involved in, and many other things that they're involved in. So we really had to capture students out of our classroom, because it was based out of a classroom, and that was the most important issue, is capturing, going to classrooms and doing presentations and doing your 5-minute wrap and telling them, like, this is an important issue, you work hard, play by the rules, you deserve a fair wage. We had debates, we had tons of things to get people